Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you on this Memorial Day. And we want to start off, obviously, Senator, by saying thank you to so many who gave the ultimate sacrifice for this country, so many that protect and defend, and so many families that today is a really hard day for them, remembering their loved one who fought, protected, and defended this country.
I hope you spend some time with your family, spend some time with your kids, but I also hope you stop and think and say thank you to the heroes who keep us safe, who keep us free, who are responsible for every liberty we have. On Memorial Day in particular, we remember those heroes who gave the ultimate sacrifice, the last full measure, those who lost their lives protecting our nation. Every year we honor them. We remember their sacrifice. We are grateful. We honor their loved ones and their families. And we also honor those who are still serving, who are risking every day and risking potentially giving their own lives so that we can continue to be free for everyone in the armed services, for everyone who has served, and especially for those whose loved ones have given the last ultimate measure. We just want to say thank you. We appreciate you. We are grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, amen to that. We've got a lot that we're going to cover, including some big news on the possibility of getting a deal done with Iran. That is something that's going to be very interesting as well. And Senator, I want to get your overview on this real quick because it's important. There is a lot of people that are online that are throwing up a lot of things. Some of it's based in fact, a lot of it is not, and it's just speculation. People trying to score political points left and right here. So I want to get your overview and your take on this and exactly what you think about where we are. Are we close to a deal? And what does a good deal look like for the United States of America? Before we get to that, I do want to pause and talk to you about the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews and the amazing work they're doing right now for those in need in Israel. When you hear about Israel in the news, it's easy to think of headlines, politics, or another conflict far away. But for families in Israel and Jews around the world, this is incredibly personal. Anti-Semitic attacks in the Holy Land and across the globe are happening right now. Elderly Holocaust survivors who endured so much already, again, fear for their lives. Jewish families are praying for the freedom to worship in safety. And in moments like these, your voice matters, because your voice can remind them that they're not alone. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is inviting you to leave a personal prayer or message of encouragement that will be delivered directly to someone in Israel who needs hope right now. Not filtered through the media, not lost online, but personally delivered. A simple prayer, a few heartfelt words. They can lift the spirit of someone facing fear, uncertainty, and isolation. This is more than support. This is standing with Israel when it matters the most. Go to prayifcj.org. That's pray, P-R-A-Y, ifcj.org. And you can submit your prayer today. That's prayifcj.org. So, Senator, let's break this down for everybody. This is complicated. A deal was always going to be complicated. But when you have people trying to score political points in dealing with this, it's frustrating because there's a lot of people that are saying, what's actually going on?
Well, that's right. There's a lot of news breaking, and it's difficult to tell what is true and what is not true. There's some active disinformation online. You have a bunch of different sides all trying to push their own narratives. What we're going to try to do in this podcast is what we always do, which is walk you through the facts, walk you through what we know, and walk you through what exactly is happening. Let's start out with the objectives in Iran. President Trump has been very clear about the objectives in Iran. Number one was nuclear, preventing Iran, making sure Iran never, ever, ever gets a nuclear weapon. Number two was missiles, and preventing Iran from using its missiles to terrorize its neighbors, to terrorize American servicemen and women serving in harm's way. Number three was their Navy, and their Navy that Iran had been using to project force and to threaten, in particular, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. And then number four was terrorism. Iran, for 47 years, has been the number one funder of terrorism in the world, funding over 90% of Hamas, of Hezbollah, and of the Houthis. And so President Trump made the decision to go in to launch this military attack. As regular listeners of Verdict know, I spent the entire day before President Trump launched this attack with him on Air Force One, flying with him from D.C. to Texas to a big rally in Corpus Christi, and then one-on-one, the two of us together in the Beast, the presidential limo. And almost all of that time we were talking about Iran. I urged him to go down the path that he's on. I believe the decision to launch this attack was the single most consequential decision of President Trump's presidency. And I think it was exactly the right thing to do, and I think it has made America safer. Now, where are we now? In terms of military objectives, the president's success is extraordinary. The success of our military is extraordinary. I mentioned the missiles. The missiles are almost entirely gone. The missile manufacturing capability is almost entirely gone. Not only that, the drones are almost entirely gone, and drone manufacturing is almost entirely gone. Not only that, the Air Force is in rubble, bombed and sitting on the runway, and the Navy that I mentioned, the Navy is sunk on the bottom of the ocean. So in terms of military objectives, it's been extraordinary. Not only that, the Ayatollah is dead. Many of the mullahs are dead. Many of the senior leadership of the IRGC are dead. In terms of military operation, Iran spent 47 years building a military, and in 39 days, the United States military utterly and completely eliminated it. Now, where do we stand now? We stand, number one, with Iran acting really as terrorists, threatening the Strait of Hormuz. And number two, we have the ongoing threat of nuclear weapons, both through Iran's continued desire to enrich uranium and through Iran's possession of substantial amounts of enriched uranium. In that context, President Trump in the last few days has put out several statements saying that we are close to a nuclear deal. We are close to a deal with Iran, and I got to say, if that comes to fruition and it's a good deal, that would be a phenomenal outcome. I think the president has achieved incredible success right now, to date, in this military action. And look, Ben, part of what makes this confusing to understand is I think there are multiple sides that are putting out online different narratives. So Iran and Iran's echo chambers. Iran and Iran's echo chambers are putting out in massive quantities online that this deal is a complete capitulation, that the president is going to send them tens of billions of dollars, that they'll keep their enriched uranium, that they'll continue to be in charge. Look, that would be a terrible outcome, and there's a reason the Iranians are pushing that. In fact, they've been pushing memes of the president bowing down and kissing the feet of the Ayatollah. They're not subtle. But those are also not disguised. Those are foreign propaganda that are coming from our enemy and our defeated enemy in this military conflict. The president has also been clear that he said we're close to a deal, but we're not there yet. It's not 100% negotiated. And I will tell you the history within this administration at every step on foreign policy. There have often been two or more camps within the administration that are pushing for different outcomes, that are pushing with respect to Iran, either to be more vigorous in insisting on the red lines the president has drawn, or less vigorous in simply trying to get out of it in a hurry. And I think the president has been right saying he was not going to back down from enforcing those red lines, from protecting the American people. And I, for one, am confident, I hope and am confident that he will continue to hold that line.
Well, when you talk about what a deal could look like, let's also go through those parameters. What does a good deal look like? What is it as conservatives we should make sure that we're advocating for? I'm one of those where I go back to what the president said very early on. There's no circumstance where Iran is going to be able to get a nuclear weapon. That to me is number one. It's a national security issue. And I think that's where a lot of people are just straight up lying online about this issue as well.
Yeah, look, that's right, and you're right. That's the number one objective: is that an Ayatollah who chants death to Iran, death to America, having a nuclear weapon, is completely unacceptable. I'll tell you, I put out a tweet this weekend on all of the swirling rumors of the deal and what could be in it. Here's what I said. I said President Trump's decision to strike Iran was the most consequential decision of his second term. He was right to do so, and we achieved extraordinary military results, including destroying all of their missiles and drones and sinking their entire Navy. If the result of all of this is to be an Iranian regime still run by Islamists who chant death to America, now receiving billions of dollars, being able to enrich uranium and develop nuclear weapons, and having effective control over the Strait of Hormuz, that outcome would be a disastrous mistake. The details are still coming out, and I pray that the early reports are wrong. But the fact that Biden's Rob Malley is praising the deal is not encouraging. President Trump believes in peace through strength, and his strong leadership has already made America much safer. He should continue to hold the line, defend America, and enforce the red lines that he has repeatedly drawn. Now, when I sent that, Twitter and the internet was all lit up, and in fact, Drudge Report breathlessly put a story of above the fold as their top headline story: Cruz defying the dawn, disses Iran dealing. And Drudge is known for subtlety, and let's be very clear. What I was saying was precisely the opposite. What I was saying is President Trump has been exactly right in how he has conducted this military conflict in Iran, and he's done so despite significant naysayers around him urging him not to hold the line consistently. And so what I'm saying very publicly is, Mr. President, you've done an extraordinary and an historic job in Iran. Don't listen to voices that would urge giving away the victory. Now, here's some good news. What has happened on Sunday, the administration set up multiple calls with reporters, with different briefers, and one administration official told people on the call that Iran has to, quote, address the main issues, which are nuclear and the Strait of Hormuz up front. And the phrase they used on that call was, quote, no dust, no deal. Now, that approach is exactly the right approach. There should not, at a minimum, there should not be concessions until Iran hands over their nuclear material and opens up the strait. And that is consistent with what President Trump has been saying. But again, there have been other voices saying, no, we don't need to insist upon that. And so what I am urging the president, both privately and publicly, to do is hold the line, remove the enriched uranium, prevent Iran from enriching uranium. We've had incredible success. We've already had, based on the degradation of the military, Iran's ability to support terrorism is dramatically reduced. But we need to open up the Strait of Hormuz, and we need to ensure that never, ever, ever does Iran have a nuclear weapon. And I'm encouraged, not only that, but something the president put out yesterday was really striking, which is he said that in the discussions that multiple Arab countries had also agreed to join the Abraham Accords. Now, if
that was a big deal. And can you remind people quickly exactly what is in the Abraham Accords, why it's so significant, and then the significance of other countries wanting to come into the Abraham Accords and how that strengthens it in a very, very big way?
Well, the Abraham Accords were historic peace agreements negotiated at the end of President Trump's first administration. And they were peace agreements between Israel and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, Israel and Bahrain. I was there on the South Lawn of the White House when the Abraham Accords were signed. At the time, multiple Arab countries still had not entered, and to this day have not entered the Abraham Accords, the biggest of which is Saudi Arabia. And in terms of the Arab countries, Saudi Arabia is the most important counterbalance to Iran. And I think the Saudis were on a path to joining the Abraham Accords at the end of Trump 1, and had President Trump continued serving in the White House for an immediate consecutive term, I think the Saudis would have already entered the Abraham Accords, but they didn't. Joe Biden came in, and it broke up the progress we'd made towards deal and towards peace. The Saudis and other Arab countries coming into the Abraham Accords, normalizing their relationships with Israel, it would essentially bring peace to the Middle East between the Arabs and the Israelis. Look, the Arabs and the Israelis have been in conflict from the very dawn of the nation of Israel. And if the president is able to bring the Arabs and Israelis into the Abraham Accords, into peace agreements, into normalizations, into trade and commerce where they're not at tension, they're not engaged in military conflict, but instead they're working together and trading with each other, that would truly be an historic milestone that would change the entire geopolitical landscape.
You look at now, you bring that up, and then you say, okay, there is a midterm coming up. So let's just talk about the timeline here. We're almost to June. I think it's pretty clear the White House understands this needs to get done sooner than later. We need gas prices to go down because of the midterm elections. I also think national security is more important than the gas price at the pump right now. But you want to make sure you win the midterm election, so you have to think about those things. How much of a runway do you think we still have before that becomes a real issue? Is it 2 weeks? Is it a month? Is it 6 weeks? I mean, how much time? Because obviously Iran's looking at this the same way we are.
Yeah, look, the good news is I think President Trump is clear-eyed, that he's not just reading polls and running scared, but rather he takes very seriously his obligation to protect America, that he's commander-in-chief, and that when the Ayatollah chants death to America, when he leads mobs chanting death to America, when they fund the Iranian regime has murdered nearly 1,000 Americans. They've been carrying out war against us for 47 years, and I think the president is committed to finishing the job. I don't think that's going to be driven by short-term political impulses or by the polls. Yeah. And I will say, the president has a phrase that he's fond of, panicans, which is Republicans who are panicking. And I got to say, on the Iran war, there are some panicans who are like, well, it's just got to end right now because of gas prices because of November. Now, look, let's put gas prices in context. Under Joe Biden, gas prices soared to over $6 a gallon. That really hurt. People were feeling the pain from that. By the way, the Democrats at the time were celebrating that. You had Democrats who were saying they wanted gas to be $10 a gallon. Remember, these are the same people who were trying to ban the internal combustion engine and force everyone to buy an electric vehicle. So they wanted high gas prices, and they got what they wanted. President Trump came in, and in the first year of his second term, we saw gas prices drop nearly in half to about $3 a gallon. That made a huge difference. That lifted a big load off the shoulders of a lot of Americans. And it was the result of common sense, sound economic policies, ending the regulatory assault on oil and gas. Where we are now is gas prices have gone back up some. They're about $4.50 a gallon. So basically, we've given back about half of what we gained. And it's not complicated why. And anytime you have a military conflict in the Middle East, gas prices go up. People, that uncertainty in the Middle East predictably has an impact on gas prices. What I will say is I think, number one, that impact is short term. Number two, if and when we reach a good resolution in the Middle East with Iran, I think we will see the long-term trend of gas prices go down and go down significantly. But
and the reason why is there's so much oil that's been backed up waiting to get out of countries in the Middle East because of the Strait of Hormuz and the issues there. So traders I've talked to, they said they expect a total crater once there's a deal and safety and security and they can get back and forth through the strait with no issues at all because there's so much backup of oil that is desperate to need to be sold because of capacity issues as well.
Yeah, and by the way, a total crater is not a good outcome. If you look at gas prices, gas north of $100 or oil north of $100 a barrel is too high, and that results in high gas prices. But if you see the oil prices collapse down to $40 an oil, $40 a barrel, that's not good either because that ends up putting a lot of American producers out of business, which ultimately makes us more vulnerable to foreign producers. So you want to be somewhere in the middle. You want prices high enough that American producers keep exploring, keep developing, because that economic independence gives us enormous freedom, but you don't want them so high that people are feeling the pain at the gas pump. But here's the point I want to make on this, Ben. Everyone who is freaking out, it's not that many. It's a handful of mostly political knuckleheads in the Beltway who are freaking out and saying, we've got to end this immediately or else the midterms. I have seen zero data that back up the case that the midterms have gotten materially worse because of the military conflict with Iran. Look, 6 months ago, we were in a rough political situation where we were in about a D+6 environment, meaning nationally the numbers were showing that the polling was about 6 points more Democrat than it had been in November of 2024. Well, today we're still at about a D+6 environment. So it is still bumpy. We got work to do. We got work to do in terms of making the case to the American people about the historic victories that have been won in the past year and a half. But I see no evidence in the data that the military conflict with Iran is doing meaningful political damage for the midterms. And I think short-term obsessing over polls and not finishing the job would be an historic mistake. And that's why I'm confident President Trump won't do that.
Final question on this, and then I want to move to some other news. But the Strait of Hormuz, in this deal, what does that look like? And what is it that we should be advocating for? Should it go back to the way it was before, or should America be more involved? Should other countries be more involved? What does a good deal look like to make sure we have security there as well?
Listen, and I want to be clear. I'm not part of the negotiations, so I've not had a briefing, classified or otherwise, on the precise details. So I see the reports that are coming out. I see the propaganda that Iran and their allies are putting out. I see what left-wingers who hate the president are putting out. And then I also see the reports of the calls that the administration is putting on for reporters. But the details of the deal I don't have right now. So what precisely is agreed upon or should be agreed upon, until I see what the details are, it's hard to have a fully formed opinion. But the Strait of Hormuz needs to be free and open. It needs to be open to commerce. And Iran should not be profiting off of it. I mean, Iran has talked about wanting to charge a toll for every ship that travels through the Strait of Hormuz. That would be a bad outcome. Look, I think anything that results in the regime in Iran being stronger is a bad outcome. The outcome I would like to see is regime collapse. Not to have Iran governed by Islamist radicals who chant death to America. Look, who they choose to govern themselves, that's for the Iranian people. I don't want America to be in the business of nation building. I don't want us to be running other countries. But not having a government in place that is trying to kill us, I think, is very much in our interest. So the Strait of Hormuz, I think the president is focused very clearly on opening it up, but he is also right now exercising asymmetric power. Right now, there is very little direct military conflict happening in and around Iran. We're not actively bombing and shooting right now, but we are blockading Iran bringing oil in and out of the nation. That is putting massive economic costs on Iran, and I think it's one of the real lever points to get this conflict to end. I think we will see it end, and I hope it ends soon, but I also hope that the president holds the line and ends with a victory that builds upon the incredible victories the United States has won the past several months.
Well, and you mentioned even the Abraham Accords and other countries going to come into that. That could be
historic.
A massive byproduct of all of this. I want to move back to the elections here, the midterms here. One of the most interesting things about the midterms
By the way, Ben, I mentioned that I was at the signing of the Abraham Accords. Do you know how many Democrats came to that signing?
How many?
0.
Wow.
Not a single House Democrat, not a single Senate Democrat. Historic Middle East peace, something not seen in decades. Not a Democrat came there. Do you know one of the first things the Biden administration did when they came into power?
Well, I'm assuming change, alter, or get rid of it?
They instructed the State Department in writing, you are not allowed to refer to the Abraham Accords as the, quote, Abraham Accords. Amazing. Instead, you have to call them the, quote, normalization agreement. And Biden did everything they could to de-emphasize the Abraham Accords and to stop passage towards peace. 0 countries joined the Abraham Accords during Biden because their ideology, they hated Trump so much that they could not acknowledge the foreign policy victory he had won. I think we will see additional countries come into the Abraham Accords, and if the president is able to do that as part of a peace negotiation that permanently stops Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, then that would truly be historic. That would be the kind of step. Look, the president has not hidden that he would very much like to receive a Nobel Peace Prize, and bringing peace to the Middle East is almost the classic.
That's a worthy one, right? Like if you're ever going to get one, if you're ever going to get one, that would be like the reason to get one, in my opinion. There, I want to move the midterms and talk about something that I actually think is very, one, interesting, but two, why every time when I'm having to debate this on TV, it's, the Republicans are in trouble, Donald Trump's in trouble, the midterms are going to be a bloodbath, they're going to be a disaster. And I keep saying the same thing over and over again. Look at who the Democrats are running. There are radicals in the Democratic Party that they are running instead of what I would argue would be the easiest way to win if you think you have an advantage. And that would be to run moderate Democrats that are like not crazy and hate law enforcement and want to abolish ICE and want to get rid of law and order and basic things in America, like waste, fraud, and abuse, for example, and the funds that we've seen that have been stolen through Medicare, Medicaid, and hospice, and the list goes on and it keeps growing. But right now, I'm not that sour on the midterms, Senator, because I see who they're running, and I think that's their biggest liability. And some of these are in very big races where I'm sitting there going, if you're saying you wouldn't have taken this risk with this candidate, but I also think it tells you about the Democratic Party. They're not saying they want to run these radical extremist candidates that have said insane things in their past.
Yeah, look, I got to say, you're right that this is potentially a bumpy political environment in November, although I'm still optimistic. I'm optimistic we hold and grow our majorities in both the House and Senate. I don't think that is off the table at all. I think it's very much in flux right now. But I will say that the Democrats are helping us by nominating some of the craziest loons I've ever seen. Listen, and parties can do a lot to affect their outcome in the general. If you nominate strong candidates who are widely appealing, who are attractive, who have real records of success, that can be formidable. And if you nominate lunatics who scare the voters, that can hand the election to your opponents. And I got to say, I think there's no candidate in the country that better embodies just how bat-crap crazy the Democrats have gotten than Graham Plattner. Graham Plattner, their nominee for Senate in Maine. Now, let's start off. Look, Maine is one of the obvious pickup opportunities for the Democrats. Maine is a blue state. Susan Collins, the Republican senator, is the only Republican elected in all of New England. And so in a state that votes by a large margin against Donald Trump, if you're the Democrats, that's an obvious place to say, all right, let's target a pickup there. And in fact, Janet Mills, Democrat governor, relatively popular in the state, was running. And yet the party has gone so crazy that their own governor was deemed not crazy enough. And instead they went with Graham Plattner. Look, the governor might have been
by the way, I wish you were joking, but you're really not. I mean, if you're a extreme Democrat 3-4 years ago, you're now moderate in the Democratic Party.
So who is Graham Plattner? He has described himself as a communist. It used to be the socialists were the extremes. I cannot think of another major Democrat nominee who is self-described as a communist, but Graham Plattner, that's how he described his own political and economic philosophy. Graham Plattner had, and you've heard this because at this point most people had a Nazi tattoo on his chest. Not just a Nazi tattoo, a Totenkopf. What is a Totenkopf? It is a Nazi skull and crossbones that was the symbol of the SS that ran the concentration camps in Germany and throughout Europe in the World War II. That's what he put on his. So you've got an actual communist Nazi is their nominee. And by the way, we've seen Democrats rushing up to Maine to support him. Bernie Sanders this week is up there campaigning because the communists and the Nazis standing together. But I got to say, it is amazing. You might think, okay, a Nazi communist, that's pretty out there. That's going to be tough to defend. This guy's Oppo file, I don't know who's doing the Oppo research on him, but he's having more fun than anybody has ever had in the history of politics because every day something comes out. And I'm going to repeat some of it, but I'm going to give a caution that most of what's in his Oppo file I can't repeat because this is a family-friendly podcast, and this guy is so profane, he's so obscene. So one of the most recent comments that he put on Reddit that just came out was, quote, "You don't have much experience with Latin American hookers, do you?" That would be the Democrat nominee for Senate in Maine. What else did he say? He also attacked a veteran, an Army combat veteran who received the Purple Heart. He did this online, and he called him a dumb MFer, although he did not abbreviate MFer. And he said this Army combat veteran didn't deserve to live.
Yeah.
This guy wants to be a United States Senator. And by the way, just today, he was questioned by it, about it, and asked if he wanted to apologize. Give a listen to what he said about when he was given the opportunity to apologize for calling an Army combat veteran and a Purple Heart recipient a dumb MFer who didn't deserve to live. Here was Plattner's response.
I was wondering if you regret the post about the Purple Heart veteran, if you think you need to apologize to him, what you would say to voters who might be upset by it.
I deplore towards the infantry. Any attempt to say that I disrespect veterans is slanderous and offensive.
Do you think you owe him an apology?
Do you know how many of my friends have Purple Hearts? Do you know how many of my friends got wounded?
I'm sure a lot.
Yeah, a lot of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, that's what you call a double down there, sir.
So no apology. Doubling down, by the way, he has some bizarre things. He talks about how women who are raped, it's their fault. He attacks African Americans. He says they're cheap and they don't tip. Oddly enough, he also wrote about, this is bizarre fantasies about how every time he sees a porta potty, he wants to go inside the porta potty and masturbate in the porta potty. Look, this is weird. This is not mainstream. This guy is extreme. And you know what Elizabeth Warren says about someone who says all that?
She likes him. Vote for him. Send money.
Even more, she says, quote, "He's my kind of man."
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That was her quote from this. Yeah, he's my kind of man. A guy with a Nazi tattoo is a communist who says he likes to do that in a porta potty. There you go.
And understand, look, the Democrats are so extreme. He can attack and mock and insult women. He can attack African Americans. He can attack Jews. He can attack veterans. And they don't care. They all circle the wagons. He's our guy because he's a Democrat. And they're unwilling. There is nothing too much. By the way, they love to call every Republican a Nazi, and yet when they have a guy that puts a Nazi tattoo on his own chest, they're good with that. And they're not backing off. And not only that, but you look at the corrupt corporate media. Just this week, what did Time Magazine do? They put him on the cover. And it's entitled Party Crasher. Yeah. Now, I got to say, Time Magazine, it's interesting because they have a long history of putting Nazis on their cover. They were fond of putting Adolf Hitler on their cover. I did have some fun online when I said, hey, Grok, what is a Totenkopf? And does Time have any history of putting Nazis on their cover? And you could read the whole response that came up to that, but the short answer is yes. And I got to say, having seen this guy's daily drip of Oppo, between now and November is going to be interesting because I guarantee you there's a lot more coming.
Yeah, there is, and we'll cover it all here. Don't forget, we do this show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hit that subscribe or auto-download button wherever you get your podcasts. And we also do the show on YouTube as well, so you can watch us on YouTube or on Facebook. And the Senator and I will see you back here on Wednesday morning.